Hi, Rebecca. I've always assumed your name to be Becca. I don't know if
Yeah,
that's
I go
correct.
by both. So, yeah, but good to see you, Cynthia.
Okay, so can you give us a bit of an introduction?
Definitely. So, I am in my first year of clinical bioinformatics, genomics, STP trainee. I am based in London at Guy's Hospital working with Synovus. And as you can hear by my accent, I am originally from the United States. I had moved to the UK just before I started the STP, but I did come on a spousal visa because I got married to my British husband. So, although I'm an international applicant technically, I can't really answer questions about getting a visa since I did have the right to work coming in. But I do know that that is available to people if they need it. But basically, I came in to this specialism mostly with a background in genomics, actually, and I was a genetic technologist in the States. And I had completed a bachelor's and a master's degree in cell and molecular biology. And I was using that to work in a clinical setting, and I was working with next generation sequencing, which is a really big area that is applicable to the bioinformatics specialism as well. So, throughout the career that I had before the STP, I did have a little bit of experience here and there with bioinformatics, but never like super developed that skill set. And at first, my impression was that you have to be really, really strong at programming if you want to choose the bioinformatics specialism. But that is not true. It's good to have a little bit of experience just to know that it's something you want to work on and you want to continue developing. You wouldn't want to get there and then think, I actually hate this. This isn't for me. So just enough to know that you have a growing passion for it is enough. And when I realized that, I thought, okay, this is something I could actually do, and I'm actually really interested in this area. So yeah, that's pretty much my background. I don't know if I missed anything
Yeah,
there.
you didn't miss anything. So like there are so much information in what you said right now, and I'm going to try to go into them bit by bit.
Sure.
Talking about your background as a genetic technologist working on next generation sequencing. So, were you in the lab doing wet lab work, or were you doing computational stuff, which is majorly related with bioinformatics?
Right. So during the previous master's that I did, it wasn't a thesis-based master's, it was a work placement or internship-based master's. So the work placement that I had was actually in the bioinformatics department of a lab that was performing next generation sequencing. So I worked doing that for a couple of months, and it was very introductory because I didn't have any skills in bioinformatics when I came on. And they were using R, our programming language. And what I ended up doing was developed a simple app using R. So that was really my first exposure to bioinformatics. And then from there, they ended up hiring me on to be a technician. So they said, we don't want to hire you on full time for bioinformatics, but we want to take you into the lab. So that's sort of what started my career in the more wet lab area. And then from then on, I worked there for a couple years, and I had a few other jobs as well doing more wet lab type of work, like pipetting, setting up samples, DNA extractions, library prep, and setting up the sequencers as well. So I had that little bit of bioinformatics experience at the beginning and thought this is really cool and something I would love to turn my career towards in the future, but I never knew when I would have the opportunity to do that until I found the STP program, which really is now my opportunity to learn more about bioinformatics and shift my career in that direction, which is really exciting for me.
Okay, so what was it about bioinformatics that you really love and decided to like go back to? Because for someone that had that level of genetic experience, you could have gone for genomics or cancer genomics. Though I know we don't do most of the lab stuff. So, what was it that made you to like stick with bioinformatics?
That's a great question. I think programming, coding skills are so impressive. And whenever I've seen it, I've always had that little tickle in the back of my mind of like, oh, I wish I could do that. That looks so cool. And I've just always admired it. And it was something that I wanted to be able to learn. And I still feel that way towards it. But in addition to just liking the work, wanting to do the work. The work-life balance for people who work more on the computer science side of things is normally really good. It's a lot more remote work. So currently, I only have to come on site 1 day a week, and pretty much all of our work can be done remotely, which I really like that as well. And I think when you're choosing a specialism, you should think about, okay, am I the personality type where I prefer remote working, where I prefer being on site every single day? Because some people do prefer that style of working. Or then there's other roles that are more hybrid, where maybe you're coming in 2 to 3 days a week, which I think genomics and cancer genomics specialisms, at least at my trust, they're more hybrid of like 2 to 3 days a week. So that's definitely something to consider, of not just the work that you'd be doing, but the style and the work-life balance that you'll be having with what you
Yeah.
do.
Yeah. Okay. So now that you've fully transitioned into bioinformatics and you're still in your first year, what is your coding skills like now? What STP rotations are you doing? Are they getting you to learn coding now, or how are you going about that?
Great question. So, just for background, coming in, we had 16 trainees come in during my year, and it was about a 50-50 split of people who had little to no experience versus people who had a lot of experience or had even had a bioinformatics role professionally before they came onto the STP. But the training that they delivered to us is under the assumption that you're starting from nothing. I can imagine it's a little bit boring for the people who know a
Yeah.
lot, but for me, I was like, this is perfect and this is exactly what I needed. So they've given us a lot of resources, a lot of training resources, websites, and projects that we can just work through on our own to develop coding skills on our own time. But it's been very self-directed for the most part. We had one specialist training week towards the beginning where it was a solid week, sort of an intensive of going through a bunch of different coding skills that we would need, like version control, Linux command line, and Python programming mainly. And then they said, okay, here's your introduction, and here's all of these materials that you can work through on your own time to try and advance this. So my goal throughout this has been about to try to spend about an hour a day if I can. Sometimes it ends up being more like 15 minutes or 20 minutes, but to work through these materials and be pushing my understanding and my proficiency in them, because it really is like learning a new language where you can't just spend a week or 2 weeks looking at it and then suddenly get it. It is something you have to repeatedly do in order to absorb it. So it's something that I'm still actively working on, and I am happy with what I've learned so far, but it also feels like the more I learn, the more I learn that I don't know, you know?
Yeah.
So it is very intimidating, but exciting at the same time, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, it's an ongoing push for me, definitely.
Yeah, it's a good thing that you admitted that you have so many resources available to you. That's one thing I appreciate about the STP. Even as a cancer genomics trainee, I have so many information and resources available to me that sometimes it can get shocking, but I try to
Yeah.
remind myself that it's a process, and
Yeah,
you're supposed to be learning it bit by bit before you get there.
right.
Okay, so about I did a bioinformatics rotation, so I have a bit of knowledge about that.
Oh, good.
Talking about the pipelines and the variant interpretation, is that mostly what you guys do, or are there other specific things that you do in bioinformatics?
Yeah, so I would say that the main focus, at least in my specific department and trust, is on supporting the delivery of next generation sequencing data and results. So, for anyone who's interested in going into bioinformatics, they really need to have a strong understanding of what NGS is, and the type of data that it outputs. A few other groups also support Sanger sequencing and a few other techniques, but it's a really big focus on NGS currently. And we, yes, develop pipelines to process the data, but also a big focus is on data storage, especially cloud storage or also cloud data processing of the pipelines is a big push. So there's a lot of considerations that go on outside of just the pipeline. It's where does the data come from? How do we move it where it needs to go? Where do we store it? And how do we make sure that the data is safe throughout every part of that process because it is patient information, it's sensitive information. And also, there's so much documentation that goes into all of that. So, I think one neglected component of the skill set that a bioinformatician needs to have that some people might not realize or focus on is the clinical science knowledge of understanding validations, writing SOPs, following SOPs, reproducibility, and just all of that documentation that goes into actually delivering a pipeline. That's a big part of our work is just documenting things, controlling the version history of software and making sure that's all documented and rigorously tested before new versions get released. So yes, it is mainly about the pipeline, but also all of these things that support the pipeline and support the delivery of that pipeline. And so basically the pipeline runs, and what we do is help develop a list of variants that's found in the patient sample. And then that list of variants is then what gets sent on to the genomics or the cancer genomics clinical scientists. So we work very closely together, but that sort of gives you an understanding of the division of the work. So the genomics clinical scientists mainly focus on the variant interpretation, and then the bioinformaticians focus on getting them those variants in a safe and reproducible way, is how I would describe it.
Okay, yeah, that's really very interesting. So that means the university module of having to do cancer genomics and having to do the genomics side exposes you guys to what the specialties are about, since you'll be working together with both of them, right?
Yes, yeah, that's right. My understanding is that I will work together very closely with these other specialisms in the genomics field, and we're sort of all in it together as part of the wider genomics specialism, right? So that is our multidisciplinary team, and understanding the way that we work together to deliver those patient results is really important for anyone going into the interviews as well to understand that co-working.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Okay, so if you want to advise someone coming into clinical bioinformatics as a specialty, or choosing clinical bioinformatics as their specialty, would you say it's very important to maybe develop a coding skill, or it's fine to just come in without the skill? So if you have to go back before coming into the STP, would you try to develop a coding skill to maybe make it faster for you, or what would you say?
I would say that it's important to develop it to a point where you can say confidently, I know this is something I would want my full-time job to be. Because for some people, maybe it's more of a curiosity of, oh, this sounds interesting. I'm just going to apply for it and see what happens. But then if you get to the STP and see how much it actually has to do with software development, you might be like, whoa, I'm actually not sure if this is for me. So I would say that you should definitely develop it to a point where you're confident that you're interested in this and it's something that you want to work on. And there's ways to do that online. There's so many resources online now, different websites where you can do coding workshops and boot camps, and even some more bioinformatics specific ones. Like I'll call out Rosalind, as in Rosalind Franklin. That's a website where you can do some entry level bioinformatics problems. And when it comes to writing your application, you could say, I have taken it upon myself to complete such and such problems on this website, or working independently. And this would illustrate that you do have a genuine interest in this technology. I do think that's important. I'm not sure how an application would go if you just said, I don't have anything, but I'm just going to wait and see if I like it. I think you need to have at least a little bit of something, but also it's okay to not have any formal experience or a job in bioinformatics in the past.
Yeah, that really makes sense. That shows that you're interested in this, and it shows your motivation as well. Now, talking about the application, what was your, as an international applicant, even though you didn't need the visa, so what was your application experience? Was it your first application, and what was your experience on it?
So my application experience, it was pretty intense for me. I tried really, really hard to get into this program, I will say, because basically in my personal life, I had been dating my now husband and knowing that eventually I'm going to move to the UK. So I started to search for ways to transition my career to the UK, and I happened upon the STP program online and found out about it right after the application window had closed for the previous year for 2023. So I was like, okay, I'm going to do everything I can to prepare myself for the next round and try to get in on the next year. So I really spent, I would say, a full year preparing my application. And one major resource that I used was the STP Discord. And there are other forums as well where you can get support from people who will help you shape your application. And that was so, so important. Also, I had done a couple of NHS interviews here and there because, and it was for genomic technologist positions. Never got offered one. So the STP was my first successful NHS interview, actually,
Wow.
and my first NHS job. So that in and of itself is a whole thing. Like, if you've never done an NHS interview before, it's worth heavily researching it and the way that it's going to be. Because I remember going into my first NHS interview, like, not really having prepared, just knowing like I know my stuff. So if they ask me anything, I'll just sort of give whatever answer comes to me. And
Mhm.
then it was so formalized and so rigid that I was like, oh my gosh, that this was actually so much more technical than I was expecting. And I knew that I needed to push myself and get myself to a level where I could be successful in that style of interviewing. So yeah, it was intimidating, but I think if you set your mind to it, anything is possible and any experience can be used in the application to strengthen your application. So it's not just about the technical skills, it's about transferable skills and values as well. Um, so I used personal examples or examples from volunteering opportunities that I had to illustrate different values in my application, the NHS values. So yeah, I think if you know what you're doing and you research a lot and you really really try, it is possible for to get into the STP or even have it be your first NHS job, as it is for me.
When you mentioned Discord, I just smiled because I remember you from Discord.
Yeah,
Oh my God, what's going to happen now when we're changing so many things? We're just there, and
yeah, it
so
was so
it's
scary.
a lot of preparation went through it because you shared a document with me that a lot of, I think, the NHS constitution values a lot of information you have put through and in preparations for the interview.
Hmm.
And I was like, wow, I would like to, I hope we all get in, and I would love to meet this person because the level of preparation. So when we all got in it, I was so excited to meet you finally.
Oh,
So
that's so kind. Some people might just say I'm a try hard and I went way too far, but you know what? It worked. So
that's what matters, right? That's what
yeah,
matters. It's not about what anybody's gonna say. It's
yeah.
about the end result. At the end of the day, it all works for us. So
Hmm.
yeah.
Yay.
Yeah. Then okay, what about your interview experience? What was your interview like?
Yes, so I was extremely nervous. Oh my gosh, but I had prepared extensively, like we just talked about. I was just looking over the document that I wrote up to prepare for my interview, and it was 64 pages long of notes that I made. So, just to give some general advice about how to prepare for that interview, basically, I created a Google Doc and I started collating information from everywhere on the internet, anywhere I could find tips about the interview, because there's different Instagrams and YouTube channels where you can get tips. So I just started putting all the tips in one place and also used the Discord asking current trainees how I should focus my research for the interview and prepare for it, which led me to discovering that there's three general types of questions. One of them is general science questions, which is more about healthcare science and patient care and the NHS, those types of topics. Then there are specialism specific questions, which is about knowledge that you have within your own specialism. And then there are values and behavior questions, which focus on teamwork, equality, diversity questions might come up. Um, so those are the three areas you sort of want to be preparing for. And what I did was I thought up all of the example questions I could possibly think of and then worked through and answered them and thought of as many examples as I could to try and answer my own practice questions that I was coming up with. And also, another thing I did, which I really recommend, is having the courage to cold message people on LinkedIn, either current trainees or current people working in your specialism. And when you message them, it's really good to say something like, hey, these are the areas I'm studying for the interview. Would you add anything to this? Rather than just saying like, hey, I need help on this interview. It's good to come to them with, you know, I'm trying, this is what I'm trying to do. Is there anything you would add that maybe I missed on what I could be researching for this interview? And that worked out really well for me. And I had some really, really helpful and kind people through LinkedIn help me narrow down the topics that I would need to research for the interview. So that's what I did. And it ended up being 64 pages. But I felt that I answered every question that came up in the interview. Nothing like stumped me. It was all things that I had covered in my research leading up to it. So I felt pretty confident after it, which was good. And I did end up getting offered and getting my first choice. So that was really, really good. Um, Another tip that I have is this could be a good time to use AI tools like ChatGPT, which I know is maybe a little controversial, but ChatGPT was really, really good with helping me prepare for the interview because I could ask it, I need to think of some questions that might come up regarding this topic. What types of questions might come up? And it will generate areas for you to think about or things like that. It was really, really useful. What else? Ooh, another good thing that I did that I would recommend doing is I researched emerging innovations in my field because there might, I can't remember if there's actually questions that come up about it, like tell us about an emerging innovation. But when it comes to the point of the interview where the floor is opened up and you can ask questions to your interviewers, it makes you look really, really good if you can say, I'm aware of this emerging technology. Is this something that you're looking to apply in your team, or has this become relevant to you at all? And then they'll go, oh, good question, you know.
Yeah.
That's a really strong way to end the interview, is to have questions prepared, and especially about upcoming topics is a really good question to prepare, I would say.
Wow, wow, that's like you've you've given a very good prep for anyone preparing for the STP interview, and like I don't know what else to say. So thank you for giving that detailed prep. I
Sure.
felt I prepared so much for the interview, but I don't think I did as much as. So wow, that was really good.
Yeah, from
Thank you.
others I've spoken to, they did not go this far or have to prepare this much. I felt like I did because it was my first, well, wasn't my first NHS interview, but every interview I had was unsuccessful. So I was like, okay, I need to turn this up a level and really
Yeah,
make
it was
sure I make it. Especially because in our year they announced at the last minute that it was a competitive interview, and before
jumping.
that, like we got the shortlisting, and I was like crying. I was like, I got shortlisted. This is it. I got the job. And then you have to be the
Yeah,
best at the interview. So
I
yeah,
I remember that experience. We're all on Discord screaming. So what's gonna happen now? What's
I
gonna happen?
know. Oh my
Yeah,
gosh. I hope they stop doing that to future years, like
yeah.
changing things at the
Hopefully,
last minute. Yeah.
hopefully, but whatever happens, at least it's different now that people are aware that something like this happened to 2024. So there's every possibility that it can happen to them. So at least it won't come as a shock to them
Yeah.
anymore. Okay, so now that you are a trainee, I you mentioned earlier that you're married. So how do you find balancing work, uni, and your personal life generally?
Yeah, it is a lot. And I would say for this job so far, I've only been in it for 6 months. You know, it's first year. We're about halfway into first year. It can really feel like maybe there's some periods of time where not much is going on and you're kind of like, okay, what do I work on right now? And then another period of time comes where you have to have these 20
Yeah.
things completed right this second, you know? So realizing that and then finding a way to manage my time and structure out the time that is a little bit less structured is really, really good. So I use my Outlook calendar a lot to break out time into blocks. And I realized what my best working style is, which is to work on multiple different things throughout one day, just in blocks of 1 or 2 hours, which some people don't like that. Some people are more like, I want to focus for 8 hours on one thing, which is fine. But I think realizing what works for you is really important. So then you can start to structure your time in a way that works for you. When I do that and I'm working efficiently, I haven't yet had to work outside of my work hours, which is really, really good. And I'm just still starting first year. So I don't know if that will eventually change. It definitely could. But that's a really important part of work-life balance, is to make sure you're not going outside of work hours, if at all possible. I mean, maybe studying for some of the uni exams. Yeah, I was doing that on the weekend, but that's a little different, you know.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I would say structure your time in the workday so you don't feel stressed and like you have to work outside of the workday. And then I try to focus on more restorative and active ways to use my free time. So I love volunteering. I love going for walks and exercising, spending time with my husband and with my cats. You know, time around animals is a really good way to recharge. So I guess that's my strategy, is keep work to work and life to life, and what you do in your free time, try to make it restorative, and that's the best way to handle stress for me.
Yeah, wow, that's really great. I have something similar. For me, I've got a 3-year-old, and you
Mm,
know how that can really get. So
yeah,
try to like find what works for me best. So when we have exams or when I have to prepare for something, I try to do it like wake up earlier when she's still sleeping and my husband
yeah,
is sleeping. So that way I get enough time to focus and no one is mommy, mommy, mommy
yeah.
distracting me.
Wow.
So yeah, that's what works for me when I have to work from home, waking up early and trying to cover most of the stuff before she wakes up. Then maybe when I have to go into the office as well, I try to also get to do some training activity stuff, and if I have some uni stuff I get to do them as well. I think what works most, just like you said, is understanding your schedule and understanding
Hmm.
your strength. Then you find what works well for you and you stick with it. That way it
Yeah,
won't be so overwhelming and very stressful.
that's
Well,
right.
thank you. So what's a typical day in your life like? So when you say you work from home 4 days a week and you have to
Yep.
go into the office once, when you go into the office, what do you do? And when you are working from home, what do you do? What's a typical day in your life like?
Right. I should add on to my last response as well that I am quite fortunate that my trust and my team that I work with respects that we are trainees and our main focus is on our rotations and our training activities right now, which is not the case for a lot of STPs. A lot of STPs start doing service work quite quickly after joining their department, from what I've heard. So I feel really lucky that I'm being given the bandwidth to focus on my training when it's a mixed bag across the training locations, you know, how much work you will be assigned that is departmental work versus just STP work. Um, so I think that division of what you're working on is different for everyone. Um, but for me, yes, our my trust is extremely supportive and understanding that our main focus right now is just to be a first year STP, really get caught up to speed and be focusing on our rotations. So during first year, we go through 4 rotations through different departments that we will eventually be working with and interfacing with. So my main focus has been on the rotations and the training activities associated with the rotations. And then in between rotations, I joined back with my home department with the bioinformatics team, and mainly what I've been doing while I'm with them is either catching up on training activities from the rotations or working on uni work or working on my programming skills and developing those a lot more. And I've been given small tasks here and there from my training officer, which are meant to help me develop my programming skills. Like one of them was I made a simple website using Django, it's called, which was really cool. So it's whenever we have a downtime where there's nothing really left to work on, that's when my training officer comes in and says, okay, well, here's something that you could do that is going to help your learning. So far, haven't been assigned any actual service work that is going to support patient results. It's just been more a focus on my learning, which is really, really nice.
Yeah, yeah. That sounds really great. And for my trust as well is also very flexible, and
That's good.
they also let you do stuff and learn at your own pace. So it's like making me to take everything slowly, and I really love that about my training as well. If we're going to talk about, I know we've spent some time talking about your background, and we went deep into bioinformatics and all. So if we have to go specific to clinical bioinformatics, what would you say is the role of a clinical bioinformatician in a patient pathway, and what do they really do in your specialty?
Yes, so everything relates back to patients. And for anyone thinking of applying, interviewing, anything, it's always about the patients. It's always about delivering results that are going to impact decision making or treatment decisions for the patients. And bioinformatics has emerged as sort of a niche field of its own, thanks to developments in genomic techniques like next generation sequencing, which were able to rapidly sequence many patients' DNA on one run and generate gigabytes or even terabytes of data. So how do we process this data and glean information from it that can be used to inform the patient's treatment? So that is the role of the bioinformatician, is to understand the biology and the genomics of what the test is trying to do, and then having an understanding of the computer science techniques that need to be applied to make that large amount of information into knowledge about the patient. Yeah, that's how I would describe it, as sort of an intersection of computer science and of biology. And it's not a patient-facing role as well, which is important to note. We would never speak to a patient or have any of that sort of interaction. Our work more so exists as sort of a support role to the genomics and the cancer genomics clinical scientists to help them get the variants, get the information that they need that can then be reported out to the patients. So we might be part of multidisciplinary team meetings where, oncologists, if it's a cancer test, come together with clinical scientists from different backgrounds to help interpret genetic findings. Bioinformaticians could have a role there, but it wouldn't be something that ends up being patient facing, if that makes
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah, that makes sense. That's really cool. So, if you have one advice for someone applying to this specialty next year or whenever, how far this video gets, what advice would that be?
I think I just covered it, which is that patients are everything. And I have had the opportunity to help a couple people review their application statements for this time around. And a couple people that I've reviewed for have really, really strong research background in bioinformatics, or really, really strong technical skills, which is amazing. But you can't forget about that this is an NHS role and what the NHS exists for, which is to help people bring equity of care to all people in England, right? So everything you do needs to draw back to that. Also, don't neglect the clinical science side of things, which I mentioned before, which is like the validations, training and competency, quality assurance, quality control, understanding concepts like sensitivity and specificity when it comes to validating tests, because all of these quality assurance components are what help us guarantee that what the patient is receiving is of a high quality, and we have a lot of confidence in it. So you can have the most amazing technical background, write the most amazing Python code ever, but if it's not validated, then it can't be used in a clinical setting. So that's really, really important. Don't forget about the clinical. Don't forget about the patient focus and the values of the NHS. And if you can synthesize all of those things, you will be a successful clinical scientist in bioinformatics, I think.
Well, that's really awesome. That's great. Then another set of advice for people that will be starting the STP this September as first year. Because for me, if I have to advise anyone, I would say be prepared for the, should I say, the shock of the new things you have to learn. I don't know the level of experience whoever is coming in has, but for me, I had so much to learn.
Yeah.
So yeah, if you have to advise someone coming into the STP, what advice would that be?
Oh my gosh, yeah, I think not freaking out if you don't completely absorb something the first time that you're exposed to it, which is something that myself and I'm really fortunate there's another bioinformatics first year trainee at my trust, so we're sort of going through this process together. And we also communicate quite a bit with our cancer genomics and our genomics trainees, so we're sort of like all in this together. And all of us have been going through this feeling of freaking out because we're being exposed to something and we don't fully understand it, but then it's time to move on to something else. And we're
Yeah,
like, but I don't know, I don't fully grasp every part of it. And then the people leading the rotation are always like, don't worry, you'll see this a million times through your 3 years. So I guess my advice would be to trust that advice and that your first year is just about being exposed and you're not expected to be an expert on every single thing you encounter right away. And the things that are important will continually be driven in over time so that you will have the time you need to absorb everything over time. So, yeah, I think just deep breath, relax. If you're starting this year, you got through the hard part, which is the application and the interview,
yeah,
which is honestly so much more stressful for me than actually starting the job. Once you start the job, you can just breathe, absorb things as you will naturally, and not freak out about it. I think is my main advice.
yeah. Well, that's a great advice. So thank you very much, Becca, for
Yeah,
coming on to this episode of the STP Diaries. So do you have any other thing you would like to add? I don't know if I missed anything or
I don't think anything else to add. I just really admire what you're doing here, and I hope it can really take off. And, supporting each other is how I got to where I did. It's because of current trainees who helped me. So being able to pay that forward in any way is really, really special. And I'm glad that I could be a part of it in some way. So thank you for what you do.
yeah, thank you very much, Becca, for doing this with me.
Yeah,
So much, and that will be it for today. And thank you.
awesome. All right, well, have a great week.